Welcome, everyone. This is Trey Jadlow. It's on the 28th of January, 2017. I had to restart the Hangout. I accidentally hit the start button and was meaning to just open a window, and so I had to start another Hangout. Hope people don't get lost. I'm here with my friend Jon Mcdropout, and we have had a conversation or two before, and it's been a while since we've talked. And Jon, you had asked for an opportunity. I didn't even prep here. You'd asked for an opportunity to talk about, asking me to give more clarification on what I mean for the sanctity of existence. And I thought you asked something about R.C. Sproul.
Yeah,
or something, because
of course. I mean, that's a continuation from our former conversation. I had made two critiques of R.C. Sproul at the beginning of our sort of interactions, where I had said that I thought he was uncharitable and also incoherent in a certain sense. And so, like, we had kind of got into uncharitability, and I thought we had really had a good conversation with that. But I'd kind of held back on the idea of incoherence, and that was sort of what I was hinting at, that I wanted to get back to that. But we definitely don't have to delve into that if you don't feel like it, and we can. I mean, but I think that sometimes within the topic of this sanctity of existence, I hear things that sort of remind me of Sproul. So we might actually hit it as we go. So
okay, that's fine.
cool.
Wherever you want to go, I'm a freewheeler. I'm very disorganized, and so
excellent.
Well,
thanks so much, Trey, first for this opportunity. I really appreciate you having me on your channel and continuing the conversation with me in person. It really helps us to kind of get the dialogue actually flowing here.
Yeah, it's good, and you've always been a kind interlocutor, so I'm happy to engage you. So let's go ahead and get started. Do you want to start with the sanctity of existence?
Yeah. You had brought it up. The reason we had started talking again is because I had seen you in a conversation with Brenda. I think it was Tuesday, maybe. Mm-hmm. Might have been Monday. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah. So you had a short conversation with Brenda von Onsen. Now, I'm not really familiar with her. I don't really know too much about her in the community. People tell me she does a lot of like the live hangouts, but I haven't been paying attention to those very often. So I was in your conversation with her, you had mentioned that the sanctity of existence is what all morality boils down to, or that like you felt like it was sort of the basis for which all moral decisions end up being made. Yeah. And I don't know, I wanted to take you to task on that because I felt like Brenda was actually bringing up some really great points, and you had kind of cut this conversation off a little early before those points had been brought up.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think my initial reaction was, and as I kind of thought about it, I was like trying to get, a good feel for why I had that reaction to you, why I felt like you were being unfair to Brenda. And mm-hmm. I don't know, I kind of came to a realization that Brenda had sort of brought up a shortcoming in the description of sanctity of existence as a basis for morality, right? She had brought up theft as a clear, like what we might call like a moral dictate or a moral axiom, right? And yet, like, existence seems to have very little to do with the idea that property and ownership are towards an individual, right? Both the existence of that property and that individual aren't affected by the transference of that property. So it seems like depriving one person of another isn't really an existence issue. So do you see what I'm saying there?
No, so because when you steal from somebody else, you are violating that person's will, their autonomy, their ability to. It's something that is theirs that you are violating it by stealing it. I don't understand how that doesn't follow.
Okay, so I mean, maybe this is the confusion then. Like, when we talk about sanctity of existence, like I think I kind of understand the idea of sanctity or sanctification, like Latin sanctio, which would be like to fix unalterably, right? It's like meant to make it an inchallengeable truth or supposition, and it generally is talked about in terms of within theology or what an authority figure might sanction, right? So I do understand the root of that word, and I think I get what you're saying in that sense. But when you say the word existence, you like, because in the example we gave with theft, you seem to equate existence with autonomy and bodily autonomy and like the autonomy of personal property, right? And I think that while those things are in fact important, I don't equate those with the term existence itself. So are you using existence as a catch-all term in that sense? is there like a narrower definition of existence that I should be looking at, or am I seeing existence as too broad a category, right?
Well, actually, I'd like to go back to the sanctity of existence.
Sure. Yeah. Let's
The
do
idea
turn by
of
turn. That's awesome.
yeah, to be sanctified is to be set apart or to holy or special. I mean, you might
Yes.
just say that existence is special. Sometimes people are offended, or not offended, take umbrage with the fact that I'm using a term that is generally associated with religion, and they say, well, I don't want a religious term, and I'll say just special, So existence is special. Holy means set apart. It just means in a different category, that we all consider humanity to be special, or existence, even that which is alive or that which is sentient, should be set apart as being different than, say, a rock or something like that. Although I would say that all existence, all contingent existence, must be holy in some way. In other words, it must have some significance. Otherwise, it would not exist, because it's contingent, it's dependent in nature. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been created. But there's a difference between, when I talk about sanctity of existence, usually in moral categories, is we're talking about sentient beings, particularly as it relates to humanity. And existence means that either you are or you are not. That would seem to me to be the most easy understanding of the concept, that there is either you're being or there's not being. There's something or there's nothing. So whatever there is in relation to us, which is always in the context of humans talking about right and wrong, that's what we're discussing. We are sentient creatures, and from my perspective, made in the image of God. Therefore, we have been determined to view existence as special, and everything that we do is going to be centered around that concept that that we need to treat existence as if it is special and objectively worthy of being.
Okay. Well, I'm sympathetic to that point of view. Obviously, I mean, in some senses, I do believe that the basis of our moral reasoning and moral understanding is our experience of our own existence, right? And so, in that sense, I kind of see it as forming our moral sentiments. But when you use the word existence to mean just that which is, rather than as opposed to that which isn't, right? Like that's a more difficult thing for me to see as the definition that you're using when you say sanctity of existence, right? Like that which is oftentimes doesn't fall within moral categories, right? So we end up having, that's where I kind of see the disconnect, right? Like you can say that existence is sanctified, but unless you're going to specifically delineate exactly which existences you're talking about are being sanctified, it's almost like the term has no aim or no goal, right?
Okay.
So I'm not arguing about the sanctification part. I think we're both in agreement as to what we mean by what it is to be set apart, to be inviolable, I think is a good word for it, right? You just can't violate that thing, and that's So, but I think we're stuck on existence here. So
okay, for me, we're speaking under the rubric, and this whole conversation is under the rubric of moral actions among humans. So of course, when we're talking about the sanctity of existence, we're talking about the sanctity of existence among humans making decisions that have moral import. So that's already been defined.
Sure.
That's what our conversation is about.
I get that. But I mean, isn't there a further clarification we could make, right? When you say like sanctity of existence, when I think of existence, I think of course, like all that is, but like I think that existence can be kind of equivocated with anything that's experienced. So you could kind of say that anything that's experienced is an existent in that sense. And so for me, like you could say like the sanctity of experience, right? And get a more narrow view of that, right? Like then I don't have to say the existence of a rock is equal to the existence of a human, or I don't have to quantify or qualify the existence without without losing the real clarification of that. So I mean, would you be open to amending the definition, or do you feel like existence is capturing something that I'm missing by saying experience?
No, I thought I already did clarify it. I said that our experience is not like the experience of a rock, and our sanctity is not like the sanctity of a rock. there's difference. I am saying, I can say in a broad category that in order for something to exist, it must be valued by someone, otherwise it would not be. But that's not the context of our conversation here. We're talking about the sanctity of existence, moral law as it relates to Jon Mcdropout and Trey Jadlow.
Okay.
And we're always going to,
yeah.
every decision we're going to make in that category is going to be rooted in our presupposition that existence is special.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to disagree with that. I actually do think that existence is special, and especially like our ability to experience things within existence is a special category that sort of keeps us, I think, motivated to continue experiencing. So in that sense, I do think that there is sort of this like transcendental goal towards that sort of idea. But I worry that, like, you know, when we talk about the sanctity of existence, that we're putting valuations on things that aren't necessarily as valuable as we're sort of making them out to be. And what I mean by that is that, like, sanctity of existence isn't really it's not a very common phrase within philosophy, right? Like, I've never really seen it used except in some very interesting ways, right? That sort of don't talk about the topics we're talking about here.
That's probably because I made it up.
Yeah, it seems like it's sort of like you've conjuncted the two or three different terms, or three different phrases, maybe. Not two or three. What I mean is that, like, when I first heard sanctity of existence, what I first thought of is the common refrain from my early upbringing, where people talked about the sanctity of life in discussion of the terms of abortion, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes that's a phrase that's been very commonly used. And I was curious if you were looking at it sort of along those terms, like as a comment stemming from that particular usage of the term.
Maybe inadvertently. I wasn't making a direct correlation to abortion, but it's the same thing. Obviously, yeah, we're all ironically, we're all products of the history that we have. And I mean, it's funny because oftentimes the most kind of my interlocutors when I speak are the apostate Christians like yourselves, which is kind of ironic that you've informed who you are by your past, whether you like it or not. And so, yes, maybe that way will be that I didn't purposely think, oh, how I can come up with it. That term, sanctity, or that phrase, sanctity of existence, is just something I came to. And I'm sure there's all kinds of conglomeration of ideas and everything that brought that together. But I just said, you know, it just makes sense to me. That's my big thing, is I'm always challenging myself and my people with whom I speak, is to own your ideas. And so that idea of the sanctity of existence, that whole term, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that, but just thinking about things myself, that's how I've come up to this idea that all moral code is based in the sanctity of existence, which really, it correlates with Romans chapter 2 that says that there's a moral law written on all of our hearts, and it's always going to be rooted in the sanctity of existence. And since God himself is existence, he is to be revered as holy.
Sure. Like, I definitely, I mean, I'm sympathetic to that. I mean, from your point of view, that really has to how it has to be, right? Is that God is creating value in people, or like at least attributing value to people, and that's what makes those people valuable, right? And I think that's sort of the sanctity part, right? Like, he's setting aside certain elements and not others, as far as what he believes should be set apart, inviolable. But I mean, within that, right, like, you have, like, God setting aside, like, people, but the moral interactions between them are, I think, a more complex dictate, right? Like, while he can sanctify the value of each life, it does seem like most morality is a weighing of two lives' values against each other in a lot of senses. There's oftentimes people's values which end up clashing, and sometimes even internally we have those things that clash within ourselves, right? So, I mean, how would you use the sanctity of existence to sort of delineate what it is that you believe, right? Like, how would you make those valuations apply to you in a very, like, objective sense? Like, if I was to break it down, like, how would you say that existence is valued in your idea? Maybe I'm not being very clear. I think in a general sense, we all have this, and even my skeptical interlocutors will concede that we all have this sense
that existence is special. And it's a reductio ad absurdum argument. In other words, saying that when I'm bringing this up to my unbelieving friends, I am trying to make the point that there is such a thing as value. And if there is such a thing as value that is objective and true, then there must be an objective valuer. And because if there's no objective valuer, there's no objective value. If there's no objective value, then existence is not objectively valuable. And I always get this equivocation when I speak with my skeptical friends, is that they will always say, yeah, life is really special. And you say, you said objectively, say, no, not objectively. I just assign that to it, which is as good as saying nothing. And in other words, it's not valuable. And what they're saying is I'm living a life of contradiction. I tell myself that life is valuable, but it's really not valuable. And the reason they don't want to go there is because the necessary corollary to objective value is an objective valuer, and they can't do that because it will destroy their view.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a deeper disagreement there. Like if I was looking back at it, I would say that like maybe my formulation of morality is different than yours, because I don't see values that can be projected outward onto other people. I don't see my values as being necessarily anything other than the values that I choose, right?
Okay, so you don't believe in jail?
Well, what do you mean by that? I mean, I believe
you don't believe people should go to prison?
Well, I believe they should be segregated from a population until it's deemed that they're safe for the rest of us to be safe around them, right?
So until they embrace the sanctity of existence, they should be segregated.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the real problem that I have with that, right? Is that they could grab on to the sanctity of existence as a principle, and yet they could still manage to justify all the acts that they did before, right? And I think that's my big problem with the generalized notion of the idea of existence, right? Like It seems like it's not specific enough to really determine whose existence and what we're talking about when it comes to existence as a valuation system, right? So like while I agree that like it is in an objective sense, seeing objective value coming down from above is like the most stable way to look at building a society or dealing with moral calculations. But what actually happens in real life is that our morality is in fact valued by each person, and their experience informs, like you were saying, I mean, their experience informs their construction of that moral valuation system.
Yeah. Can you hold on just a minute? Somebody called me.
Yeah.
I think I got a doctor waiting for ground. Hold on just a minute.
Thanks. And I won't say anything while you're gone. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate everybody who's tuning in right now and later. I know I told Trey I was not going to talk while he was gone, but I lied. Yeah, it's going really well. I'm enjoying talking to Trey. I'm just going to put it on mute until he gets back.
Okay, I apologize. I've got a patient's bringing a case by, so I'm going to have to, when he gets here, I'll have to, for about 30 seconds.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, take your time with that. I understand you're working. That's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time anyways. I appreciate you doing this for me.
Yeah, no,
So I mean to pick up where we left off. That was sort of my problem. Is it? I feel like it's not a specific enough guide post as far as really determining what is moral in a certain situation. Now, but I guess I mean you have a view that this valuation is dictated from above. So clearly there's like a source that we can look at, right, to make that valuation. But I just feel like it doesn't translate to someone who I would like to convince to be part of the society, right?
Well, actually it does, because from your view, all you're saying is, I want to rule over you with my strength, with my personal preferences, nothing more. It's not the sanctity of existence from your perspective. So in other words, to be consistent with your view, Hitler was wrong simply because he was not strong enough. If he could have been stronger, he would have been right. So it's might makes right in your view. It has nothing else. Now, what you're doing right now is you're presuming the sanctity of existence from your perspective, but you're pretending not to. You're not trying to be dishonest, but you're just not seeing it. You cannot presume the sanctity of existence and then say there's not an objective sanctifier of that existence. And so what you're doing is John, you know how many conversations I've had on this.
Yeah,
So you're not doing anything new here.
I agree. Okay, technically there's a part of me that wants to agree with that statement. Although I think maybe your classification of what my morality is going based on is probably a little skewed, because I don't necessarily disagree with the idea of sanctity of existence in a generalized form when applied to the right circumstances, right?
Okay, give me a circumstance where the sanctity of existence is not the determining factor.
Theft, right? So within the concept of theft, the deprivation of property,
Right.
I can't see an existential question in that, right? There is no idea that the existence of the objects itself are going to somehow be set apart or inviolable.
Well, sure they are. Don't you believe in ownership of property?
Yes, but I don't think it's inviolable, right? Like, it's not a fixed thing. Like, ownership is transient. It seems to go from person to person.
But it follows the standard, though, where you pay cash for it and it's yours. And if you believe in any sort of ownership, then you're setting the standard.
But like, I don't like think about everything that we do in society, right? I mean, all cash is the idea of our money is in trust to the central banking system, right? Like, we don't technically own that dollar. We hold on to that dollar. It's a representation of our earnings and our potential, right?
Yes, but you're putting it in the context of a framework, and you're saying that framework is set. That's what it should
Sure.
be. And what you're appealing to my point.
I know I do. Okay, I'm definitely. I think I'm following exactly where. Like, I think the look, the idea of sanctity of existence obviously is it's appealing, right? Like, I get the idea, because like I said, I mean, I value, as a human, I value experiences, and I project those to other people. I think that they would value experiences as well. And so in that sense, I feel like I've given enough warrant, right? Like, I'm the one who's sanctioning the valuation of existence in that sense. But if I move that to theft, right? Like, my valuations seem to transfer just as easily, right? Like, and it doesn't seem like I have to have any sort of above sanctification coming from above in order to make that leap, right?
Okay,
Like, that's where I'm sort of getting disconnected from you, because I don't believe active sanctification in that sense.
Okay, so
Like,
what is theft?
If existence is valuable, it's valuable to everybody.
Okay, so what is theft from your perspective? How do you define it?
Deprivation of property, or the removal of someone's property, right? So the idea of
Right.
property obviously has a bit of there's some assumptions that are already built into that.
Yeah, you're presuming that it belongs to somebody else, their person, and you're taking something that belongs to somebody else without their consent. That's what the definition of the term means, right?
Right.
Okay, so I don't understand how are you not violating that?
Well, because
person?
I mean, you can take it with their consent, right? Like, there's
Well, then it's not theft,
nobody's
right?
existence is being violated by switching my consent from yes to no.
Then
Right?
it's not theft.
But it's not. But it's like, no. But I mean, it is, right? Like, if I switch my yes to no, it becomes theft, right?
Right.
I've
And if you
removed my
said yes
consent
to
from the
yes,
removal of my
it's not
property.
theft. Right. So
Right.
it's not theft.
But I can switch that, right? There is no, like, that's
Yeah,
what I
but then
don't
it's not
understand.
theft.
Nobody's existence is violated by me switching my answer, and so
Right.
it seems
Nobody's
like
But if you do switch your answer, it is. In other words, in one category, it's called theft theoretically, and that's violating that person. And when you change your answer to yes, then it's not theft. And what are you talking about then?
Okay. So, but I mean, do you see how that applies now to every moral situation, right? Like within the context of all the possible morals, like murder and rape, let's say, like sanctity of existence doesn't seem to apply in that sense. There is no there is no standard by which you could hard and fast make existence the benchmark in that sense.
Well, sure it is. That's why you say it's wrong.
Well, I say it's wrong because I don't want it to happen to me in that sense.
Right.
Right. That's a universalizable moral system, right? So if I were to just look at you could say like a veil of ignorance or anything like that, you could construct a subjective moral system that could cover all of those things, right? Like all I have to do is just project my own experience onto somebody else. But that's not always the best policy. And I'm a little confused about why that would be the sanctity of existence, right? Like if
okay, I need you to give me an example of some scenario where you're not presuming the sanctity of existence. You failed with the stealing.
You don't think theft is okay, all right. Well, I mean, if the benchmark is that it has to be devoid of any evaluation, well then I'm sunk, right? Like all morals are in fact based on valuations. So I would have a hard time finding out anything that couldn't be valuation based. But I'm wondering why sanctity of existence is the basis, right? Like does it shift as much as people's valuations do? Like does everybody have a different idea of what existence is and what's valuable about it?
Oh, sure. And that's why we have, I'm not saying it's going to be easy and easy to figure out. Sometimes it's very difficult. I mean, between Christians may differ on certain things like capital punishment or something like that. Yes, that our coming to the objective reality of what God's law is sometimes can be rather difficult in some certain situations. But the fact that it's based upon the sanctity of existence is not in question. It's just like, for example, let's talk about capital punishment. Some Christians say that it's immoral to kill somebody for taking life, and other Christians say that it is moral, and in fact, it's even a moral imperative to do that. But both of those camps are basing their idea on the sanctity of existence, and one is right and one is wrong, but they are both, looking toward the sanctity of existence and making such a decision.
Yeah, but I mean, in that sense, right? Like, isn't there, like, especially with capital punishment, we have like this. There's always like this very strange issue when it comes to absolutist application of morals like that, right? So, in especially in the case of capital punishment, if you have to kill somebody who murders somebody, it only takes like the first innocent person to be killed. That seems to end up in a chain of infinite murders, right? Like you have to take the life of the person who took the innocent life of the person who took the innocent life of the person who took the innocent life, because the mistake went all the way down, right? And from an objective point of view, that's the only application that's possible. Because each person, it doesn't matter what they knew at the time, it only matters that they violated the sanctity of an innocent life, right? And so in that sense, justice would continue on ad infinitum. You can't find an end to that chain.
Yeah, like
Jesus said, I mean, eye for an eye and the world goes blind, right? It only takes a single accidental eye poking and we seem to have an issue in which, sure, I can see you got to take a hold. No,
okay.
Let's hold that, yeah.
Okay, I'm back.
Perfect.
All right, so you said that an eye for an eye, for tooth, the whole world
goes blind, right? Like,
yeah. Yes, the whole point is that's what the whole you're missing you're missing the understanding of the lex talionis, the eye for an eye or tooth for tooth. The whole purpose of that law was to show us that we are wicked, and if we received the justice that was due to us, we would all be dead. The whole purpose of it was not to go around and poke everybody's eye out, but it's to say that God is just, you are a sinner and you need grace. And that's what opens the door for Christ to come and to fulfill the law for us, so that the lex talionis is not the standard. However, that doesn't mean it's completely gone in a civil sense, but in an absolutist sense, you're exactly right. If Jesus said, if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. If he literally meant cut it off, well, you know what? We would all eventually have to cut our own hearts out, because we all are sinners. And that's the whole point of it, that we have no righteousness in ourselves. All we can do is cry out for God's mercy, and Christ fulfilled. That's which we need.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with that assessment of the Old Testament morality. I mean, I would only suggest that it's sort of a frightening morality, isn't it?
It is.
Like,
yes, it is.
I think that sort of retributive justice is sort of like taken to its to an extent. It does seem to sort of destroy everything, right? And that's what I think. Maybe that's where our disconnect is, right? Like, I think that you see an overarching purpose to the guiding hand of sanctity as far as like keeping morals in check, right? And where I see morality as this sort of development, like that humans have been coming up with in order to better and better interact with each other, despite being very primitive, right? And I think that's
well, it is true that our application of the sanctity of existence waxes and wanes. That's what we were just saying. But you're still conceding the point that always, even from your perspective, since humans have existed, they've always based their moral code based on the sanctity of existence. Their application waxes and wanes, certainly so. I was just thinking about this the other day. Every generation that comes thinks they're the smartest generation to enter the planet, until about 2 or 3 generations come after them, and they're shock and horror as to what those stupid people did. Yeah. We all have our blind spots. Every single generation. Right now, we've got abortion right now, and we think we're so moral and so great because we are tolerant of other races, let's say, for example. And yet, I'm telling you, 3 or 4 generations now are going to look back on horror with us. And it's just the way it is. We're not nearly as glorious as we imagine, but we are all lost and wicked people.
Yeah, I mean, like I do agree, and I think we can clearly see in history that there's like sort of a moral arc, right? I think we're getting closer and closer to.
I don't think so. The 20th century was the bloodiest century of all.
It depends what you talk about, right? Like, I mean, as far as like warring with tribes, like we don't wipe out villages. We don't like. There's no. Like, I mean, like, so we've made steps in advancement, and I think that like
in some ways,
the amount of people that we have on planet Earth right now, it's probably surprising we don't have more murder and chaos and war, right? Like, I think that's it does seem like that's one of the things that humans are really good at, is sort of.
No, I think like I said, I think there's more murder right now. In fact, I think people shock and horror. I think it was Ted Turner said some stupid statement about 15 or 20 years ago, said that if CNN were alive or in extant during Hitler's day, that the Holocaust wouldn't have happened. And it completely escapes his notice that in the Congo, the Second Congo War, that the same amount of people, 6 to 9 million, or maybe even more, have died in the 90s and the 2000s. But so where was CNN for that? I mean, because they're black people in Africa, we don't care. But I
agree.
That's still going on. We just don't realize it. Christians are being persecuted more now than maybe ever, because there are more Christians now. But we just don't pay attention to those things. So I don't think things are as good. I think with, for example, the introduction of the separation of church and state, which is a Christian doctrine introduced by a Christian in the United States, has done wonders for peace. So I will say that I think the United States has been one of the greatest lights in the history of mankind. We're the most prosperous, we're the most fruitful and most charitable nations that have ever graced this planet. But it's because of Christianity that we've done that.
Yeah, I'm not trying to downplay the role of Christianity, but I think you're right that the separation of church and state was one of the first real great things that America did, right? And it does in fact lead to a better openness, people seeking a little more openly, right? And I think that that sort of open community system definitely breeds like really strong communities and hardworking people. I think there's a lot of great things that come out of those.
We persuade rather than beat with a stick, and even in our religious, especially. That's why freedom of speech is so important.
So okay, so well, let's get back to sanctity of existence, because you mentioned that, like, we're getting better and better, right? But that, like, people in the Old Testament were in fact applying that same rationale, the sanctity of existence, right? Mm-hmm. And it just occurs to me that like people back then were wiping entire towns out, like there was full on massacres and war, right? And
because they were
that seemed
commanded.
like a fairly, yeah. And so I'm curious why you think that, like, because I get that like all their moral codes and things were based around the sanctity of their own existence and the existence of their community. Um, do you think that it was a failure on their part to extend that sanctity of existence to the neighbors, to the
No, because
foreigners?
the whole purpose, again, you've got to look at the Old Testament in the context of what it was written for. The whole
Mhm.
purpose of the Old Testament was God exposing his holiness, his true justice. That's what happens. All those people that were killed were not innocent people. They were wicked people deserving of judgment. In fact, all of us are. In fact, the Israelites were deserving of God's justice, yet he showed his mercy to them. And so, what God is saying in the Old Testament is that if you think that you can save yourself, if you can be good enough, you will never make it. That's why the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus was telling those stupid Pharisees, oh, you think because you haven't committed adultery, therefore you're pleasing to God? If you look on a woman to lust for her, that is at the root of adultery. Therefore, you are guilty as well. In other words, they went through all that pain and suffering through the Old Testament, and they still didn't learn from the history. But the Christian, the true Christian, understands. They look at the Old Testament, they see God's law, and they see the holiness, and they see their inability to do it. And then they say, God, I can't save myself. And so Jesus comes into the picture, and John the Baptist cries out with the Agnus Dei, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. He will do for you what you could not do for yourselves. And his gospel is what transforms people and enables them to then keep the law through the infilling of the Holy Spirit. My life is holy, John. I mean, when I was born again, I became a new creature, and I was able to keep God's law. Since then, I'm not perfect, but everything changed in my life when I was born again, and I have been bearing fruit since the day I was born again, even getting better with each day.
Hmm. Something you said there, it seemed like you might have been contradicting yourself without knowing. I just want to get, I mean, you said that because of God's perfect justice and the idea of the sanctity of existence never being live up to
Mhm.
through humanity, that we're all deserving of death.
Mhm.
Um, do you not see that as a contradiction of God's initial valuation of existence as being sanctified, right? I
No,
mean,
because Adam and
death is
Eve
not my
sinned.
existence, and it's nothing about what I value will be around after my death. And so I feel like there's something about that seems to contradict itself, right? If God sanctifies my existence, how can He also condemn my to condemn me to non-existence or to a lesser existence or to a terrible existence?
It's because of a secondary causality being a part of this realm in which we live, where Adam and Eve disobeyed and merited damnation. Just to exist is not unholy. It's to exist in Adam and Eve is to be unholy.
Hmm. I mean, I don't take that story literally, so I have a harder time seeing Adam as my like
Federal head.
representative going that far. Yeah, and I mean, I understand that part of the theology. I do, and I do respect that idea, and I think there's a lot of merit to it as far as looking at humans as sort of flawed creatures, right? I mean, I think the religion really was like our first attempt at kind of trying to look at our own flaws, like and
John,
acknowledge
stop,
them,
stop for a
right?
minute. You just said
Yeah.
religion was our first attempt to look at our own flaws. So there's such this is going the same way as Brenda did. What do you mean by flaws? Is there something wrong with us? Is there a
Yeah,
standard
I
by
mean,
which we all break?
usually I define like
This
what's
is so
wrong
easy.
as like a negative impact. So when it has negative impacts on
Against
me
the
or the
sanctity of
people around me,
existence.
no, not necessarily, right? Because like you said, I mean, once we sanctify existence, there's no way for me to live up to that particular standard,
Well,
right?
you cannot meet it, but you can desire to meet it, which is what you're doing.
Right, but like God is
They
the
weren't
one who's in
going.
control of that, right? Oh, sorry, please
Yeah,
go
can
ahead.
you hold this a minute?
Yeah,
Thank
I'll put that on pause. It's a nice Argyle sweater.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. That
Cool.
should be the last one.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Okay, I just want to say I really like your sweater. That's a beautiful little
Oh my gosh,
Argyle sweater you got there.
look at it. It's got full of holes. The reason
I
I
can
go
see
to,
that, but like that's to me that just means it's well worn. It's your favorite sweater, you know? Like
it's very warm. I go to the abortion clinic on Saturday mornings, and so I wear a leather jacket over this. You can't imagine how warm this sweater is. I never get cold. But
that's
anyway,
ironic. I go to the abortion clinic on Saturday afternoons. We probably go for different reasons, but
I would imagine so. Are you an escort?
yes, I'm an escort, and I do like a little bit of manual labor around there whenever I can volunteer the time. So.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
we're on opposite sides, but I think both of us are putting in time for something we believe in. So I think it's maybe there's value in that.
You're
What's that?
promoting the murder of innocence, and
possibly. I'm also saving innocent lives.
No,
so
you're not. No, you're not.
Maybe.
Every woman that goes in there takes a life.
Yeah, but every woman that goes in has a baby, may have her life taken. So I don't necessarily see the difference between that.
So a woman should be able to kill her life because the child is inconvenient.
I think that she should be able to make the choice, but if whether or not that includes
what about after the child is born?
Well, after the child is born, there are options, right? That's why I would never.
Why does she not have the right to take the life after the child is out of her womb? Does location make humanity?
For me, it's a lack of experience, right? Like that baby doesn't have the experience of pain, suffering, anguish. It can't project itself to the future or construct a sense of its own identity. And so, in that sense, I feel like it's less like I don't know. Here's a little dirty secret about me. Like I think that people suck, and oftentimes human beings can be really terrible individuals, right? And I see that overpopulation is one of the reasons why we are fighting for resources amongst.
Demonstrate there's overpopulation. You're a willing lackey of what's his name?
Yeah, no, I'm not saying.
There's no problem with overpopulation.
I'm not technically
what percentage of the earth is covered by humanity living in on
but we don't transfer our resources to those people, right? And like
that's
it
right.
does seem like people
do you know that the UN says that we throw away 30% of our food every year?
Oh, I agree. Yeah, it's terrible. We're
not
we're some of the worst. Yeah.
thing.
No, exactly. We just can't do it properly, right? So in that sense,
I want the problem, right?
I want slow, steady growth of population.
We don't have slow, steady growth. We have shrinking growth right now. Do you know what happens when you have a negative fertility rate?
Yeah, I mean, eventually the population does actually die out.
The average age increases. Do you know that at the end of this century, Japan, 60% of them will be extinct, and the average age, right? And within less than 10 years, every person turning 100, they're going to have a person turning 100 for every newborn. What do you think their society is going to look like when the average age is?
I've heard those stats, but like there is an issue there where we've extended life expectancy over the last 40 years, like by leaps and bounds, right? Like people coming from 60 to 90, so in that sense, we actually do have more people alive at the time, despite there being a lower birth rate and a higher.
No, the birth rate. We're still have a positive birth rate worldwide by 2050. It's going to start going negative. But every single developed nation has a negative birth rate, so they are going extinct. But the people who are poor and having children, they are still growing. Although it's going to reverse. And so once it reversed, then there's going to be mass starvation. Again, can you imagine what economy looks like when the average age is 70 years old and nobody's able to work and everybody needs? What's going to happen? It's frightful.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the propositions of the future are difficult, right? I mean, I can't really project that far ahead. Like, who knows what kind of technology will be.
You need to think about tomorrow.
That's part of my.
They look at everything.
That's part of my reason.
What can I do right now?
That's part of the reason why I'm working in a fertility clinic myself, right? So that's but I think aside from that,
a fertility clinic or abortion clinic.
Well, it's both. It's a family planning clinic is what they call it. So
okay, well, it's not a fertility clinic; it's an abortion clinic.
Right. Well, I mean, but they deal with women's fertility at the same time,
taken
right? So
from their womb violently.
Sure. Yeah. No, but I get it, and I'm not saying it's a.
You're an advocate for murder.
Correct. You might say that.
Good on you. That's where atheism leads. Atheism.
It depends on your point of view, right? Like I don't know.
No, it's not. Either it's alive or it's dead.
People are easier to kill when they're just a few thousand cells wide, right? Like
that's right. They're a lot easier to kill, but you're killing them, right?
Sure. I mean, I'm taking away his possibility of experience or whatever that baby's possibility of experience.
That's exactly right. How would you like?
You're right about that. I'm depriving them of possible experience, but whether or not that harms them, I think is another question.
You're killing them. You just admitted that you're killing them. How could it not be harming them?
but I mean, according to you, right? Like, I mean, once he's born, he is under the yoke of sin, right? Like he's going to hell the second he steps onto this planet Earth. Like, I don't get what, I mean, I'm using he as the generic baby, but that baby is going to hell as soon as it steps onto planet Earth. And like, for me, it seems like a cognitive dissonance in the argument to say that like that little group of cells is going to have a better time existing for a certain amount,
Okay.
struggling with a single mother rather
Okay, why
than
not kill it
living
after
forever in
it's born
heaven.
too then?
What's that?
What's the difference? Why not kill it after it's born too? Because it's going to hell, right?
Lots of women do, but I mean the
So do you
possibility
have a
for
problem with
experience in
that?
that sense. Well, because I don't believe in heaven, right? Like I don't think that that's actually a possibility. I think that this experience is the most valuable thing, and I want to
Why is
make
it
that as
valuable
good
though? This is
for
the point
everybody
of
as
our
possible.
conversation. Why is it valuable, John?
Well, it's valuable because of that. I would want that
I'm
autonomy
not
for
asking you
myself.
to emote about it. I'm asking for a reason. Why is it valuable?
It's
Objectively.
valuable because okay, which part of it is valuable? I just wanted some good
You just
clarification.
said that you value where there's no heaven, so I need to make the most of this life. You're saying this life is objectively valuable. I'm
Right.
asking you why.
Well, it's
There's
valuable
no
because
reason
it's my
for it.
only shot at it. It's a single
So
roll. I mean, you only get one chance.
you've been given a chance at life, and you are programmed that it is special, right?
Um, that's I would disagree with that, right? Like you may think that life is special as far as like intuitively programmed, but like we ignore all sorts of forms of life and we ignore their uniqueness and specialness all the time, right?
Is
So I
that
don't
good or bad?
well that can be both good and bad, right? I mean,
Okay,
you
how can it
can't
be
you
good or
can't
bad without a standard?
well look at giants, right? Like I mean, a giant can't even function in today's life. The more pious he gets, he has to sweep stones clear of ants so he doesn't step on. He has to drink water through cheesecloth so he doesn't swallow a fly or a gnat. Right? Like people who take this sanctity of life to its extreme, to its absolute, end up being unable to function in modern society. You can't do anything because you're so scared of violating that sanctity. Right? So like
Not if we have
that's what
definition as to what is to be sanctified and what is to be eaten. We've been given animals to eat.
right. And like
I have a meta narrative. I have a reason for it.
I'll admit that I'm empathetic to other humans, right? So you're right. You're right that I'm taking my experience and I don't know how exactly to explain it without describing my own experience and saying that that is something that I see possible in other entities, right?
Mhm.
But I think the difference here is that like I look at those mothers and I feel empathy for them. I look at those fathers and I feel empathy for them, right? Like in their situation, I have more empathy for the sentient, talking, conversant entity in front of me than the possibility of a conversant entity later on. So
Right.
maybe that's just a difference in our view of the
Right.
situation.
Right. And so you're living existentially, and you're saying that therefore, since I cannot communicate with this individual human, therefore I can kill it.
Yeah, I mean, existentialism oftentimes says something like existence precedes essence, right?
Right. Mhm.
So I don't see that fetus as essentially human. I see it as potentially human, right?
Now,
That's the
wait a minute.
difference.
Wait a minute.
It's possible existence will yield an essence
So,
of
so
humanity.
it's not developed enough, therefore it's not a human being. What about a 6-year-old girl, a prepubescent girl to a grown woman? You would say that little girl is worth less than a full-grown woman
No, I don't think
because
so.
she's not
No.
developed as much? That's
Well,
all you're
she's. I
saying. You're
mean,
saying
like,
it's not
listen, a
developed
six-year-old
enough.
girl's really developed and knows what's happening to her. That would be a little. It would be harder for me to make any sort of determination in that sense. And an adult woman has had opportunity to exist, right? Whereas a 6-year-old girl is still potential, right? There's still
That's
that
right.
that
That's right. So
entity.
the 6-year-old girl is not as valuable as the grown woman, right? In your view.
No, almost more valuable than the grown woman, right? Like,
Oh. So not being as developed makes you more of a human than being more developed. Then you
yeah,
just went against your own argument.
there's a threshold there, and I can see what you're saying. That's an interesting point. I'll have to think about that. That's an interesting. But like I said, I mean, I try not to apply things in an absolutist sense, right? So that valuation that I'm making is open to reassessment. And I will of course like think about what you're saying there. But I don't think that I think once that you get to a certain point, your ability to be an autonomous entity sort of takes over, right? So a 6-year-old girl can survive on her own, no problem, right? Like there are difficulties she will have, obviously. She won't be able to exist in the same way that we do in modern society. But if survival was simply her goal, she could actually do that.
Right.
And like, so I'm less likely to think that someone should be hinged to that little girl for life, right? Like, I don't think like that little girl should have any rights on another person's bodily autonomy. Like, she doesn't have
how
the
does
right.
she eat, my friend?
Well, she has the right. She eats on the kindness of her familiars, right? Like,
That's
obviously.
right. So
Yeah.
they are tied to her in order to feed her. Why shouldn't they be able to kill her?
But they don't have to be there, right? Like, she can.
That's right.
Like,
somebody has to be tied to her, right? Or she will die. It's the
no, I don't think so. I don't think so, right? Like, I've heard of 6-year-old childs who live years on their own, right?
Let's
like,
say 6 weeks. Let's say 6 weeks.
Yeah, well, that's a different case, right? That's wholly dependent. It would
so
be,
you
it would be
can't
clearly
kill
difficult.
the 6-week-old because she's tied to somebody.
But I mean, she doesn't have to be tied to a specific person, right? That's the entity. That's the difference,
someone, right?
But that's voluntarily, right?
Because
like,
she is a pain, right?
listen, I'm not okay. Well, let's shift it away. Like, okay, I get what you're saying here. So, like, if that 6-year-old had complete kidney failure, and there was an older woman who she knows that has 2 kidneys that she can have, right? Like, should this 6-year-old girl, like, should we force that woman to give up one of her kidneys for that 6-year-old girl? I would argue no. You would argue yes. There's
no. I'm not saying that. No, I'm not saying she should be.
Well, then how?
To do it. I'm saying a mother should not be allowed to murder her offspring because that offspring is inconvenient. It has nothing to do with somebody forcing you to go on dialysis for somebody else or to give them your kidney. Nothing to do whatsoever. That woman, that child in that mother's womb, the only way it can survive is through the mother, and the mother should not be allowed to murder that child simply because that child is inconvenient. But it's a totally different scenario. You're talking apples and oranges there.
Okay, well, I mean, like, you're throwing out the word inconvenient there a little rashly, I would say. Like, as someone who actually talks to these women, I can tell you that it's not convenient in any sense of the word.
Okay, what percentage of abortions are done out of convenience?
This is probably the worst. What's that?
What percentage of abortions are done out of convenience?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to guess, I'd say it's maybe 5%.
No, 98%. Rape, incest, and the life of the mother is less than 3%, I think, of all abortions.
Well, if that's the only qualification you have for it being a convenience issue,
I
then
do. I don't think somebody should be killing
your
their 6-week-old child simply because they're under emotional stress or because it might be dangerous to raise this child.
Yeah, it might be dangerous to have the child.
I'm sorry?
It might be dangerous to have the child in a lot of cases, right? Like,
yeah, so kill it. Yeah, there's a 0.001% chance that you could die from having that child, so you have the right to kill it.
It's well higher than that. But also, I mean, like, I think you're not taking into the situation, right? Like, I think you're making it sound like it's a flippant decision, like it's just like,
no,
I decided to go buy a pair of shoes. I think that's not it's not a convenience issue. They're not going down to the convenience store. There's consultations and there's doctor's appointments and there's invasive surgery, right? I mean, all of these things are in fact big decisions that people make in those things. And I'm just curious about why you think that a mother's existence is somehow somehow their existence has to be threatened by for the sake of an existence that is possible, right? Like,
no, it's not possible. It is a human. From the moment of conception, it has 46 chromosomes. Do you know what those chromosomes look like? If I were to take one of those chromosomes out,
I get it. But the problem is that I have 46 chromosomes that come off of my fingernails, right? Like, you could get my DNA out of a skin cell out of my cheek, right? So I'm wondering why
you though.
No, obviously not, because the essence doesn't precede that. Yeah, like. There is no essential human element inside myself. That's why.
Well, sure there is.
It's the combination of things that are
your essence.
What's that?
If I kill you, am I killing your essence?
Right, because I'm an amalgamation of all these things. Right. My essence is.
But your fingernail cells are accidental properties. In other words, those are properties that you have that are not essential to your substantial form of humanity. So what we're talking about is
Hmm.
substantial form of humanity at conception. That's what's there. You could cut off your ear, or you could, I could go bald. I'm still Trey. I'm still me. Those are accidental properties. This is Aristotelian categories. But those accidents are not who I am. All right. They're a composite that adds to who I am, but they are not that actually which makes me who I am.
Right.
And so
I guess
that which is in the womb is when you kill it and no more is, you've damaged, you've destroyed the substantial humanity of that individual.
okay. But I mean, there's sort of a weird thing right there. Like, I mean, you say that like it's essentially human. I mean, do you think that women should be charged for having miscarriages then? Because I mean,
Did the woman do anything to incite it?
What's that?
Did the woman do anything to cause it?
We don't know. I mean, that's a lot of times
How are
miscarriages
you gonna
are,
prove it?
you can't tell what caused the miscarriage. It can
Okay,
be, it
so
could be
then
an
she's
event
not
that happened 2
responsible,
or
right?
3 days before.
So
What's
she
that?
didn't do it. She didn't take up a knife and kill the child, right?
It's I don't know. I mean, probably not is what I would think. Most people
Yeah.
don't do
Okay.
that.
Yeah. So why would they be held guilty?
Well, I'm curious why. Like, I mean, you say it's essentially human. It's and that somehow the full rights of full existence are granted to this thing once conception happens. I don't agree with that. I don't think that.
Yeah, because
I
it's
think people
inconvenient.
are. I think people need to be autonomous on their own in order to be considered.
What about the autonomy of the person in the womb?
Right, they're non-autonomous, right? Like,
What do you mean?
you can't remove that fetus and have it survive on its own.
And you cannot remove a newborn from her mother and have it live.
Sure, you can. Like a nurse can feed a newborn, no
The
problem,
nurse
right?
is chained to that
A
child.
fetus can't be fed by a nurse, though, right? Like that's what I'm.
But it
that's
is
what I'm getting
dependent,
at.
just like a newborn baby is dependent, right?
Yes, but I'm not really arguing about the dependence of the creature itself, right? I mean, autonomy
You're
doesn't
saying if something
necessarily
is
mean.
dependent, it's not a human.
Well,
That's the argument
I mean,
just made.
like, do you think like a newborn would have trouble? Like, newborns can swim, newborns can eat, breathe, like drink, blink, like they can look around and see things.
But they can't live in
I'm curious why.
autonomously, right?
What do you mean? I mean, yes, they can, right? Like,
But
it's
they
clear
can't.
that they can live outside of the womb.
If
It's
you
clear
don't
that they
feed
can
them, they
breathe outside of
die.
the womb.
If they don't have their mother's breast to latch onto, they will die.
Well, within like a couple hours later, right? But we have
No, a couple
formula,
of years,
we have
like,
ways of.
until they're like 16. I mean, until 12 maybe years old.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, that like children require a certain amount of like raising and like investment, but like that's not the same as them requiring it, right? Like that they would die without it. And children have proved us wrong in a lot of cases, being able to survive on their own. What was it? There's like a I mean, there was like an old Barack experiment where he took 16 months old, put them in a blank room with only ladders, and like within like children who can't walk were suddenly climbing ladders out of the room, right? Like
It's a completely different topic.
I'm just saying that babies are a lot more ingenious than you might give them credit for, and especially after they're born.
Independently. That's the point, and you know that.
I'm not. I do agree they don't live independently, and that we wouldn't want them to live independently, but they can live independently, is what I'm saying. Okay,
they can feed themselves at 6 days.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can see it happening, right? Like that's the difference, right? Like I've seen exactly that happen. I've seen babies where the mother has died in childbirth, and that child survives. It goes on. It doesn't fall apart and just wither away and die after the removal of the mother from the system. So I get what you're saying, but I
Jon,
think
I need to move on. Jon, I gotta go. I gotta get some work done before I've got a doctor waiting for
I really
to finish it up.
Absolutely, Trey. I appreciate our interaction here. Clearly, we have a lot more to talk about. I wrote down a bit of what you said, but like we can definitely pick up this on another time.
That's fine.
I want to just thank you first for being at least like you've been very gracious to me, anyways, and I feel like that was
because you've been gracious. I was nasty with Brenda because there was a context to that. She was in Hangouts. I've heard her say things. She's a mean, bitter person, saying what a stupid fool I am, and I'm the dumbest person on the internet. And then she gives her argument, and I'm thinking that is one of the dumbest arguments I've ever seen. And so I was a little snippety with her, but it's like,
yeah,
just be nice to people, and they'll be nice to you back.
Yeah,
and, I just don't take her seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big hanger out in these hangouts or whatever, and like
I'm not
and I mean,
either.
I do see that like they can become just these beat up times where they just pick a person and then it's 4.5 hours of everything that's wrong with this person, and
Yeah.
I don't know, I've never felt that that was like a really helpful way of getting to understand a person, and it definitely, yeah, like I mean, like you've just shown it, it's like it clearly it made her it kind of tainted her interaction with you right off the bat, and it clearly tainted your interaction with her from all the viewership of it. So I get it, Trey, and like yeah, I mean I hope you don't think that I'm trying to beat up on you in the
No,
sense
no.
that like we're
You've been,
yeah because
John, you've been very kind
while
to me, but here's the problem. When you
yeah
told me that you are a counselor for an abortion clinic,
yeah
it frightens me. You need to wake up, my man. You need to
okay
wake up and stop promoting murder, and God is going to judge you. I really think deep down,
yeah.
you know God exists. You're just
Well, I mean,
pressing. I
I'm
really,
open to the possibility. I've often said that, like, if he does exist and I meet him up there, like, I'm willing to take responsibility for any of my actions
no,
down
you
here.
won't. No, you don't. You're not going to want
Okay,
to. I'm
sure.
telling you,
Well,
don't
me and
stand for the murder of innocent human beings. That's wicked,
me and
John.
God
That's
have something. I
wicked.
mean, God murders it, by that same standard. God murders 30% of babies in the womb, right?
Because of
There's
Adam's
33%
sin,
miscarriages.
because Adam's sin, yes, there
Uh,
is. But if he is God. It is
he
his property. He can do what he wants. You
you
don't have
say
the prerogative to go to the image of God and say, "I'm going to snuff you."
but that's obviously the arbitrariness that like makes
It's not
your
arbitrary
moral that it makes your moral sense like hard to pin down, right? God can just take out whatever he wants. Like you were saying
because he's the one
that,
that gives definition. It's not.
but you
It's
were
not
saying that
inconsistent.
like
It's totally
you
consistent.
said people have miscarriages because of Adam's sin, but like here is Jesus coming along making us new creatures, right? Like
Right.
it doesn't seem to apply to our physiology because new creatures, Christian women have miscarriages all the time.
Our physiology is different than our spirituality.
Okay. Yeah, that valid. That's a valid point. So that's, I mean, that's what all I would come back with that. Now we clearly have a lot more to talk about, Trey. So
And
please
I'm
keep,
happy to talk to you, John,
yeah.
especially with your respect and your kindness.
What?
And I feel like you had an honest interaction. When I bring up a point, you said, you know what? That's a good point. I'm very grateful for that because there
Yeah.
are some people, especially that
Exactly.
just
They want to
won't do
just
that.
dismiss the whole thing outright, and I don't think that's right. Right. Like you're saying something that you believe is true, and I think that there is something true in it. Right. And so I want to find out what that is. Like, so let's keep the lines of communication open, Trey. You're a gracious guy, and like I hope we can do this again.
Okay. Thanks, John. You have a great evening or afternoon.
Afternoon, buddy. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All
Peace
right.
and
Bye.
love. Maybe I'll see you out
Okay.
there.
All right. Bye.